My name is Rebecca Sackett, and welcome to the session on how to take multiple signatures captured in PowerApps and place them in a final PDF document using PowerAutomate. When doing these types of classes, I like to use real-life examples. The one I created for today is a PTO request app. It's entered in by the employee in the app, and then the data is saved to a SharePoint list. Then it's signed by the employee in the app, and then we have a PowerAutomate that saves that signature as an image. And then the supervisor goes in and signs it in the app with a PowerAutomate that saves that signature as an image. And then the final piece is PowerAutomate creates the final PDF with both signatures and the data that's saved to the SharePoint list in a final document. Okay, let's get started. So I have a Word document. I kept it real basic here. It's just going to have some of the fields that we're replacing with the items from the SharePoint list, and then we're also going to put the signatures. So we're going to take this and we're going to turn it into a template so that we can replace these fields with fields from our SharePoint list and then with the image from the signatures. So the ones that we want to replace the text input, we're going to highlight the field, and under the Developer tab, you're going to select the plain text content control, and then under the properties, you can give it a name. That way you'll know what it is whenever you're trying to refer to it on the PowerAutomate. I don't have a lot of fields here, so I'm just going to go ahead and get these done real fast. And then we're going to do the signature. So for this part, right to the right of there is one that's a picture content control. So we're going to insert one of those. And then you're going to drag it over, and just think of a signature. So you're going to want it kind of wider and not too tall. So we're going to kind of drag it to a good size. Sometimes you may have to run it once or twice and adjust the size a little to get it in a good spot. So we've got two of those, one for the employee's signature and one for the supervisor's signature. So we're going to put two boxes here. And then we're for sure going to want to give these a name under the properties, because otherwise they'll come through as like an odd number, so then they're hard to determine which is which. So go ahead and give those a name real quick. And then after that, we're going to save this, and then we're going to upload it somewhere that it can be retrieved by PowerAutomate. I'm going to use SharePoint. You could also use OneDrive, depending on what your flow triggers are. But since I already have my data stored on SharePoint, I'm just going to go ahead and put this there too. So we'll go ahead and save this and then upload it where we need it to go. Okay, so here's my SharePoint list. So I'm going to go ahead and put it here in the documents. Normally I'll just make like a folder called templates, and then I'll put any in there. I always seem to start with one, but as things progress, then you have more. So I just kind of make a folder for it so it has room to grow. So we're going to upload that Word document here. And then we're also going to go ahead and make a couple of other folders after we get this in here. So I'm going to make one folder that is for the PTO documents. And then we're going to create three here. One for the employee signature to go in, one for the supervisor signature to go in, and then one where the final PDF document will go. Okay, so now we're going to head on over to the app and get started on what we need to do there. I kept this app real basic, so it doesn't have a lot of fields and there's not a lot to it. So we're going to go ahead and do a blank screen here and get started with the employee signature part. So we're going to add pin input. Make sure you don't use any crazy background colors because it's going to pull through as a solid image. So if it has a blue background, it's going to pull in blue. So I like to just use white or clear. And you wanted a decent size, so something similar to how you did on the Word document. So we're going to set a few variables here on the onVisible. I use the show loading a lot. I have like a spinner that I use. So if I'm doing something that might take a minute, I like to use that. So I always have that on my on visible so that nobody is clicking on anything when I don't want them to. So I'll have it true and false, and I put what I want on the inside. So I'm going to reset the pin input every time that they come here. And then we're going to set a local variable. So we're going to use update context. And this is going to help us ensure that it is signed, that nobody submits it without signing it. So I'm going to call it employee sign, and I'm going to set it to the pin input.image. So this will be set every time that you first come to the screen. And anytime you do a variable on the on visible, you're going to want to click away to another screen and go ahead and come back so that you can make sure you got that set before you go any further. So now we're going to do a few changes on this pin input here. So I'm going to set the reset to true. And on the on select, we're going to use that local variable that we created. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull it from over here so that I make sure it's exactly the same. You have to be careful sometimes with those variables. I've done it before where one time I do a capitalization and one time I don't, and then it's a totally different variable. So I do copy and paste sometimes to make sure it's right. So the on select is going to be exactly the same. And then I'm going to do the show controls false because I don't want them to be able to reset it. I want them to click my button whenever they reset it. So we're going to add a button for that. So I've got two buttons, and we're going to go ahead and set the on select to these. So on the reset, we want the same thing that we had here on the on visible. We're going to reset the pin input, and we're going to reset the variable back. So both of those, anytime that you click reset. And then on the display mode of the submit is where we're going to refer to that variable that we set, the employee sign one. So let's go here to the display mode, and we're going to put a little condition in here. And so what this is going to do is basically say if it's not changed from what it was whenever you first got to the screen, then it means it's not signed. So I want this to be disabled. All right, let's test that real quick. Sign. Good. Reset. All right. Perfect. And now we're going to need to go ahead and create the first PowerAutomate. So this is going to be the one that takes the signature and turns it into an image that we can retrieve. This will be triggered by PowerApps. And it really doesn't have a lot of steps. It's just a couple of pieces. Go ahead and give it a name real quick. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is a compose. And I want to change the name up there, but if I try to right now, it's not going to let me. So what I normally do is just do open and close quotes, and then I can rename it. And this is going to be their request ID, which we're going to get from PowerApps. So now I can click in here. And see, now the name is easy for me to refer to whenever I have to put that into my app. And then I'm going to create a file, and this we're going to do to SharePoint, and we're going to put it in the employee signature folder that we created. The reason I want to use that request ID is that's going to be the ID of that SharePoint list item, and it is unique. It is consistent, and it will allow me to refer to it anytime, and that will be our file name for this signature here. It's going to be that request ID. So it'll be the request ID.jpg. And then the content will ask in PowerApps, but we're going to do the same thing, put a little something in there so that we can name it. And then ask in PowerApps. A lot of times when you do this, you see the import that JPEG. If I hide this and put it back, it disappears. I don't know why. But what I normally do is just shrink it and put it back and then type it in again, and it's there. If somebody knows a trick to not have to do that, please drop it in the chat and tell me, because I spend a lot of time doing that. Okay, we're going to go back to PowerApps now. So we're going to be doing a little back and forth. So now we're going to put in the code that we need for triggering the flow, and we're going to add in the extra JSON that we need to convert this pin input to the correct format that we need. So I'm going to do on submit, and I'm going to select the flow I just created, or excuse me, PowerAutomate. I don't know when I'll get used to that. I'm going to go ahead and get that added. And so it's asking me for two things, the request ID and then the file content. So a lot of times what I do is just put a double quote, comma, double quote, and close it. And then we'll do each piece. So the request ID is going to be set whenever this form is submitted on the screen before. There's a few different ways you could do it, but this is how I'm going to do it on this. So on select here, we're going to do show loading true so that it shows the little spinner until it submits, and then submit form. And then we're going to go on the form and have some on success for it. So after the form submits, we're going to get it to do two things. One, we're going to set a variable, which is going to give us the ID number. So we're going to set a variable, we'll call it variable request ID, which is going to be this form's last submit ID. And then we're going to go ahead and navigate to the employee sign screen. So now we can refer to that variable for our flow. So the first little part here that we need, you can see up top it's telling you which piece it is. We're going to give it that variable name that we set. And this part is a little longer. Shane has a really good video that goes into a little more detail to explain what all this means. So you can either copy it exactly and use it, or you can go look at his and he explains a little better what exactly this is pulling. I've seen a few different ways of doing it, but it pretty much all has the same end result. So this is the one I like. So we're just pulling out portions of it, the portion we need, and that's what we're going to send to flow. I'm going to add a patch here, so I want it to update the status saying that they signed it. If you did the signature on the same screen, you wouldn't really have to have this part, but with us doing it on a separate screen, I want to make sure that it's updating the status each time. I'm just going to change the status after it's signed to employee signed. That's fine. My status is just a single line text. And then go ahead and send home. Okay, and I'll add my show loading at the beginning of this. I use it a lot. I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. Okay. So this is gonna, here's this loading real fast, I'll show you. So it's just a shade and then a little spinner. Sometimes I'll say loading, sometimes I say saving, but it's pretty much the same. We're going to come back real quick to our PowerAutomate and make one quick change. We need this to be base 64 to binary, and then we're going to go ahead and click back on that file content and put that in the center. So that's going to give us the last little piece of getting that in the correct format. So let's save that, and let's go ahead and test it out. So I filled in the fields. Don't have a lot of fields here. Normally I would do a lot of little calculations in rows. And then we're going to go here to the sign. So now we have an ID because it submitted that to the SharePoint list. So I'm going to put an example signature in and submit. And then I want to go and make sure that it did create a file for that signature. The name of it should be the ID number on my SharePoint list, which I think is the first item on there, so it'll be 1. And make sure that if you're checking that you actually open it. Don't just see that it's there. Actually open it and make sure it's not corrupt, that you can actually view it. So once that's done, we're going to go ahead and do the second piece, the part the supervisor does. So I did a real simple gallery. Normally it would filter for only ones that are pending and only ones I'm the manager for, but I didn't do any of that for right now. And I just put 2 buttons in here. One that they say that they deny, so it just updates the status, and one that sets the variable again to that ID. And then we're going to create a supervisor signature page. So I'm just going to copy the one we have and make a few modifications. The on visible, we're going to do a different variable. It really could keep the same one, but I like to change it just to make sure that I'm comparing everything to the correct page and that I don't miss anything. I'm also big on renaming. I name my stuff pretty detailed. So the on select will change to the one that we gave it, the super sign. And on the reset, we'll change that. And then we'll have to do on display mode for the submit button. And it's just this one little piece we have to change. And then we're going to create the PowerAutomate for this also. So just leave that for now until we create the new one. The other one is really going to be the same thing. It's just going to go in a different folder. So we're going to create a new one, and the trigger is going to be PowerApps again. So we'll do a compose and set this as the request ID. And then we'll do a create file. And this will all be the same, just the location. So this one is going in the supervisor signature. And this time, we're going to go ahead and name this, and then we're going to click in that file content so that we have that. But then we're going to go ahead and do that base to 64 to binary, and then add it in. Okay. Oh, yeah, don't forget to make it go up and back down and put the JPEG part. And then we're going to save and go back to our app and make the changes. So what I normally do if I'm going to do a new flow is I just put a fake button in here and click it. And then I'm going to do the open, close, quotes, comma, open, close, comma. So now this PowerAutomate is part of my app. So I'm just going to replace the name up here because I really don't have any other changes. It's just a different one. But other than that, the pin input name that I have on this screen has already changed for me, so I don't have to change that. I will have to change my patch down here, so the status is going to be something different, supervisor signed or something. But everything else can stay the same, and we'll just delete our little fake button up there. And this approved, so it's setting the ID of this item in the gallery, and it's going to take us to that signature screen, the screen supervisor sign. And let's go ahead and test this one, make sure it saves that signature like we want it. So I'm the supervisor, I come in, I'm going to approve, sign my name. And notice I put supervisor. I do this so I can make sure that they're going in the right spot. That's just kind of one of my test things. You don't have to And I'm going to go ahead and submit it and then go make sure it's there and open it and make sure it is what it's supposed to be. Notice these have the same name. The only difference is which folder they're in. And we have our signature. The last piece is going to be a PowerAutomate that takes both of these signatures, all the information from the SharePoint list, and puts all of it in a final document. There's a few different ways you could do this. For today, I'm going to use my trigger as when an item is created or modified. Sometimes I do create it and have a separate SharePoint list, which is where like I'll put the final, like when it's completed. But for this example, we'll just do the modified. So since we're using modified, we'll have to make sure we have a condition in there, which is going to be after the manager signed it. So we're going to look for the status, supervisor signed. And then we're going to go here in our little branch and put in a few steps. So we're going to do compose and go ahead and get that ID number. And we're going to do get file content. This is going to be from SharePoint. So we're going to be fetching our signatures now. So I'm going to select the site, and then on the file identifier, it would be, if you go to the folder, the part that's after the site. So it's going to be just pretty much written out. You're just going to have your percent, is it 2F for everywhere there's a slash. I usually just copy it and then paste it in there. And then afterwards, I'm going to add, at the end here, I'm going to add me an extra percent 2F with a slash. I'm going to pop one more compose up here, and I'm going to take this request ID and put a .jpeg. So this is the file name. Since it's the same for the signature and it's the same for the employee signature and the same for the manager signature, we can use that variable right here. So this is telling me exactly what the file identifier should be, where I can get that signature. And then we're going to add another one in for the supervisor, and it's going to be exactly the same, other than that folder location is in the supervisor signature instead of the employee. And we'll do the file name. Okay, so now we're going to use the populate word. And we're going to find our document that we saved in the folder on SharePoint in the templates folder. And here we're going to find the particular, there it is, the document we need. And all the fields that we set up should have a place for us to put in. So most of these we're just going to go through and select from the dynamic content. So the name, the reason, the dates, all the information. We're just going to go ahead and click and add those in. I had a spot for the date for the signatures. I'm going to just use the created and modified dates, but you could actually put a separate column for that. Date employee signed, date that supervisor signed, either one. So here we're going to just select the file content for the supervisor signature, and then I'm sorry, that was the employee signature. Oh no, this one's employee. Supervisor, now we're doing the employee, and we're going to select the file content here. And then all we have left is the dates. So like I said, you could do a separate column. I'm just going to use the created for the employee. So the date that it was created is the date the employee signed it, and then the date that it was last modified for the supervisor. I went ahead and formatted that. And then we're just going to do the same thing down here real quick, except the modified. Put a formatted date though. Okay. Now for converting this, we're going to put this in OneDrive. As long as your trigger is something like this one is, created, modified, that type of thing, we should be able, that should not be a problem. Sometimes if you're using a trigger from like PowerApps or something, then that could be an issue. But I like their convert to PDF. It's free and it works real smoothly for me. So I have a folder I keep that's just called temp, and it's where I save stuff for this purpose, long enough to convert it and delete it. So we've selected the request ID, and then we added .docx on the end for the file name, and then the file content is the word that we did above. And then after we created this temporary Word document, we're going to go ahead and convert this, which is also used in OneDrive. And here, all we have to do is just select the ID from the one above. And there's a few different things you could do with it from here, but what we're going to do is save it as a PDF in that folder that we created for the ones that are completed. So we're going to do create a file now, but we're creating a file this time on SharePoint. I'm going to select my site, and then the folder path is going to be, what I call it, completed, final request. And then the file name we can just select from above. So file name of the PDF, file content of the PDF. We can go ahead and delete that temporary file. So we're clicking on the ID of that temporary Word document. Okay, we could be good here, but we're going to go ahead and add a few other little pieces in. So let's say that when it's done, we also want to send an email to HR so that they can have this document. So we're just, I'm just going to do a simple email here, approved for PTO. You could put some of the fields from the SharePoint list, the employee name, the dates, any of that, but most of it's in the document, so, well, really they all are, so I wouldn't put too many. And then we could just attach, say, please see attached. So down here on the attachments, we're just going to do the name from that convert, so do the file name and the file content. And let's go ahead and drag that delete below, though. Oh, I guess I need to put a send to. And let's go ahead and test it. So I would just make a modification of some sort to test it. It's what I normally do here. And it ran, so let's go make sure that it actually created the document. So we're going to look in the final request, and we have a PDF. And there it is. We've got both signatures, all the fields filled in. I probably would spend a little time adjusting a few things, pulling that date down. But we've got the basics here. We're going to add one other piece on the end of this flow. So you don't want it just piling up with all those signatures. So when you're all done, you're going to want to go ahead, once the document's been created, you're going to want to delete it. So you're going to pull the same thing right here from that file identifier that we used. And we're going to put that in down here as our delete. So we'll delete the employee signature and we'll delete the supervisor signature. Once you get to the point where you're creating that final document, you could give it a different name, not the ID. I would recommend on the signatures to stick with the ID as the name, but once you're to that final PDF, you could pick kind of whatever you want to name it. So now I just tested it one more time and make sure, yeah, it deleted my signatures out. And that is the last piece that I have.